Welcome to the Times of Israel's The Reel Schmooze, where we bring you all the entertainment news and movie reviews that a Jew can use. I'm your host, Amanda Borschel-Dan, here with our movie maven, Jordan Hoffman. Jordan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, and I'm excited because, I know it's probably a very low percentage, but some of our listeners are also viewers because we put these podcasts up on YouTube. And since day one, and this is, I think, our 11th or 12th podcast, I've been using these enormous, chunky headphones, which are fine. They sound good, but I look like, to put it in Star Wars terms, I look like Lobot, and there's probably one or two people out there that know what I mean. I have these giant headphones, and I knew that I always had these very small earbuds that I don't like because they kind of fall out of my ear, but they look, for the purposes of this podcast, and you podcast all day long over there at TOI, you're like a podcast machine. You're always using the buds. It looks nice. I knew I had these somewhere in the house, and the other day I found them. They were in a box that they didn't belong in, and I went, "Oh my God, those are those earphones I'm looking for." And now I have them and I'm using them. And going forward, you'll be able to see my beautiful bald head with few distractions. And it's a great sunny day for all the Real Schmooze audience out there. So congratulations to me.
So, for anyone who is still with us after that scintillating moment of finding the earbuds, I did want to ask you, Jordan, because last episode we were talking about your new gadget, the snow
Oh my
blower.
God. Yes,
So,
yes.
tell us.
Well, I don't know if it was international news, but it was certainly national news. There was a bit of a storm here in the USA, and it hit some spots where big snowstorms don't normally hit, like places like Virginia and Tennessee and whatnot. But where I am in the New York, New Jersey area, we got hit pretty hard, and I was excited because I bought a snowblower and have not had a chance to use it. And it does a pretty good job. Now, it took me a little while to figure out because snowblowers can be very expensive unless you get ones that plug in, which of course is funny because eventually a big storm will come and also knock out the power and I won't be able to use it. But luckily our power stayed on. The gas powered ones are very expensive. The battery powered ones are very expensive, and also they only last for about a half hour, I'm told. So I got an inexpensive ones, but you had to plug it in to the plug, and we have a little plug on the outside of the house. And the point is, it took me a little while to negotiate that. Now I feel like I got it. It was a learning curve, but I spent more time like untangling this cord and getting it in knots and being like, and like I had to take my glove off and my hand would freeze and I would have to run in the house to put warm water on my hand because it was really cold. And I'm like, my hand is freezing off. And then I get snow in the house because I would run in and race to the bathroom. My wife would yell at me. It was a whole scene. Be that as it may, once you get the snowblower going, it's pretty damn cool. It's like a giant vacuum cleaner that just shoots out an arc of snow in whatever direction. So if you're kind of, you're on this side, you want to shoot it to the right, you got to twirl the thing and then run it. It's pretty fun. And that was great, but it snowed so much that, and then it quickly turned where I am anyhow, it quickly turned to sleet. And once that happens, there was nothing I could do about it because the machine, can't really chop through ice. So, it wasn't, I can't blame the machine for the fact that we had a very particular kind of snow. I will say one other funny thing about a snowblower. I am old.
Because I'm still waiting for the first thing that was funny about.
Oh, ha ha ha. No, this part is funny. This part is good. So because I am an old school gentleman, I still subscribe to the daily newspaper, the print paper that comes and it's thrown out on the driveway. I get the Asbury Park Press. I'm a local boy. So, I went around, with like because it was by the time I woke up, the paper gets here by like 6:37 in the morning. I'm like, oh, is it here somewhere? And I was looking for it and it didn't come. So I figured, oh, it's so much snow, they didn't deliver it. But I'm like, well, you never know. It could be under the snow. So I went to the area it normally is. I started poking it with my boot to pick it up. It wasn't there. I'm like, all right, they didn't deliver it. Understandable. I'm going through with my machine, and occasionally you get like a pebble and it goes, and it goes to the machine and shoots out in an arc. You get a leaf, you can kind of hear it flop, 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 and shoots out an arc. I hear the machine go, and then I hear, "Stook," and then my newspaper goes through the machine, flying all the way into the neighbor's yard, with the plastic wrap on it, and I just, like, I sucked it up and spit it out. It was pretty amazing, and it didn't break the machine, and the paper didn't get too tangled. It had a little hair on it, but then I was like, "Oh, I guess I didn't see it with my boot, but there it is." I found this to be very amusing, that I could fling this thing, like, across the street, so
I,
that
I
was
love
my
the imagery of that. Yeah, love it.
this is how I amuse myself in sub-zero temperatures. Anyway, the
Yeah,
big snow.
well,
Hopefully, it won't snow like that again anytime soon. It wasn't a lot of fun.
for sure. And I just want to remind our listeners that Israel, it's the Jewish homeland. Feel free to come here, even for half a year, every year for your winters, etc. Because you know what? That just sounds terrible, actually.
Yeah, the weather is better. I mean, well, it can get pretty damn hot in Israel. I mean, I was there once during a heat wave, and I experienced a heat that I'd never experienced before. So, but that's part of the charm.
It is, for sure. And, Jordan, I would have to say, well, thank God we didn't have a jangle this week that we were going to
Right.
actually present because we
No.
definitely, filled the minutes with the
Yeah.
snow.
No,
Yeah, and I have to s
This week's jangle is just to let everybody know that if you get the least expensive corded snowblower on HomeDepot.com, you can fling a daily newspaper into your neighbor's yard with the use of the device itself.
and this episode was, sponsored by Home Depot. No, I'm just kidding, really not. Okay. So, Jordan, thank you for
Yes.
your snow, update, and
Yes.
I just want to remind you as well that we never did the great, cottage cheese
Oh,
taste
okay.
off,
Okay, you're
so
right.
we have
You're
to
right.
do that, and,
That's gonna be next
so
week.
next week, I mean,
Yeah.
really, if you're still with us at this point, just be,
Yeah.
prepared for next week, another amazing episode. All right, but we actually do, to be serious, we have 2 films that we're going to talk about, and one is called, 33 Photos, I believe, and it's a documentary from, HBO that
Mhm.
many of our listeners can access pretty, easily, I believe, on
Mhm.
HBO Max, which is also now in Israel. This episode was sponsored by HBO Max. Um, kidding, really not. And then the other movie we're going to talk about later on is A Real Pain, which came out a few years ago. And at the time, I remember, Jordan, you were just like over the moon with it. And
Yeah,
then I
yeah.
watched it and hated it.
Ugh.
Well, I rewatched it and we have a
Oh,
lot to
okay.
talk
Oh,
about.
good, good. I
Okay.
wanna know more. I wanna know more.
Okay.
Okay.
All of this and more after the break.
3 million Israelis are dealing with trauma since October 7th. To help Israelis heal, Hadassah is there, with the largest rehabilitation center in Jerusalem, world-renowned medical centers, and youth villages. It's said, saving a life saves the world. Imagine helping millions. This is Hadassah, a life-changing force in Israel and the world.
And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our movie maven, Jordan Hoffman. So, Jordan, let's start with the new film, which debuted on January 27th on HBO, and the name is 33 Photos, right?
33 Photos from the Ghetto is the full title.
That makes a lot more sense, actually. So, 33 Photos from the Ghetto. And my husband and I attempted to watch it last night, and it raised this very terrible issue for me. What do you do when a documentary about a serious and very important thing just really is so slow and puts you
Yeah.
to sleep? What do you do?
Well, yeah. This movie, which we can give the thumbnail plot line to in a moment, is not the greatest. Is not the greatest, but it is. There are parts of it that are very good, and certainly as someone who, um, I'm understandably fascinated with this topic and treat it with great reverence, particularly when I'm watching it on International Holocaust Memorial Day, which I did. Uh, you know, you kind of want to come to it, but exactly what you said. I was like, let's put it this way: if I didn't have to watch this movie, I probably would have turned it off about 20 minutes in.
Yeah.
It certainly takes a while to get going. It gets better as it goes, and by the end, like the last few scenes are like really quite good. But the movie itself, I found to be somewhat unsuccessful. And I'm kind of glad you feel the same way because I didn't want to be the one saying, I don't know about this one. The basic premise is, and it's funny, there are a lot of very lengthy Polish names in this,
Yeah.
involved in this. So I am simply going to say the guy, the gal.
No,
I
call
don't.
one the firefighter, you can
Right, the
call him that.
firefighter, yeah.
Okay.
So the basic premise as it is this, and it is what makes it of interest to historians. And I'm sure we do have a lot of people who are listeners who are professional historians, armchair historians of this era of the Warsaw Ghetto, of the Holocaust in general. And it is like still it has a lot of merit, this film. It's just I found the way it was put together a bit dull, and they didn't approach it the right way. But anyhow, the base central premise is during during the Second World War, during the time of the Warsaw Ghetto, there was a Polish righteous guy, because he also hid his family hid a Jewish girl in their attic, or they called it the mezzanine. Um, he was a firefighter, and he also was an amateur photographer, and they even show like like tiny little camera that he had and he used. And even though there were strict laws saying no photography in the ghetto other than official Nazi photographers who were supposed to come in and did specific propaganda things, he took pictures anyhow. And in fact, he took 33 of them, which is why the film is called 33 Photos from the Ghetto. And most importantly is that he took some pictures during the uprising. Because he was a firefighter, his job was to go in and, they said, put out that fire, let that one burn. And, there's a lot of very devastating stories involved in that. So he had these photos and he held on to them for years. And in the late 60s, he sent them to a family in New York. And even getting them out of Poland, of Cold War era Poland, is a bit of a story. And with a letter he wrote, and he kept a diary as well. And this letter said, when the world is beginning to forget this, publish these. And then family members kind of forgot about him, or just didn't, just moved on with their lives. And only now, 2024 anyhow, is when this film was made. And you get to see historians in Europe and also in the US at the National Holocaust Museum kind of explaining the importance of these images and comparing them to the known footage. There is like a lot. I think the most interesting part is toward the end. There's like a forensics situation where they're taking very famous photos and then comparing them to these new photos and figuring out on a digital map where he was standing and what was happening, and doing a lot of sort of post-production work between the images that I found very interesting. And then there are some people from the events that are, that re children, grandchildren discussing, you know, uh, the people involved, particularly the young girl who was hidden in the family house, um, who moved to the US, afterwards. So that's kind of the basic premise.
Right, and what's interesting about her is we see her testimony to the Shoah
Yes.
Foundation, which was
Yes.
in the 90s, which would have
Yeah.
been, just after Schindler's List came out when all of that
Mhm.
started up, and then they revisit her, and so it's, like, 20 something years later, all of a sudden we
Yeah.
see her again. Um, and I just want to note that these pictures were found and displayed in Poland. There's the Polin Holocaust Museum there, and they were put on display there in 2023 already. So later, the U.S. Holocaust Museum seemed to get more involved in this, and compared with other photographs that they had in their archives from, I think it's from this girl who's the woman that we hear the Shoah testimony, and then we go back to her. I think she's the one who supplied them, but what was, found in Poland, recently are the negatives to these pictures, so they are the actual, source material for these pictures, and that was found just, in, like, 2021-ish as this
Yeah.
Poline exhibit was, put together, because this firefighter/amateur, photographer is very well known in terms of the canon of the historical images of the uprising. But now all of a sudden we had these new angles and new views and the original negatives. So that was the big, like, wow moment in
Yeah.
terms of the historical importance.
And the showing of the negatives I thought was very interesting because, this movie is a little it's maybe a little too cerebral for its own good because it isn't really that like we kind of said already, like the way it's told is I don't know, it lacks a little oomph. But there's some interesting discussion to be had about the tactile nature of early photography. A young person today simply can't fathom a world where you can't record everything in pristine digital and edit it and manipulate it and send it to your friend immediately. I mean, back in our early lifetimes, there was always someone in the group that had the camera because taking pictures was a little bit of a pain in the ass. You had to load the thing, you had to, get it developed, if even if you did it yourself or even if you just dropped it off at the drugstore. And even in the 40s, it was even more so. The earlier back you go, it was just knowing how to load a camera. I don't know how to load a camera. You got to twirl it around and whatnot. It was complicated. And it shows how there are some like almost errors in the negative, like he was advancing too quickly or his hands were shaking because he knew he was putting himself at risk by taking the picture. Because if he'd been seen by one of the Germans, he would have been God knows what would have happened to him. And also what he was seeing was, he was no dummy. He knew what he was taking a picture of. When he saw the people being marched toward the destination point where the trains would take them away, he knew that was no good. And there was one part where the image is very blurred, and the woman was like, "Well, his hands were shaking," and it's like it's amazing to think how the emotion of the picture taker would affect what is now considered a historic artifact, or you could even say a work of art, maybe because these are photographs and they hang in museums. And that's something that you don't think about today. You only get one shot with a film camera. With a digital camera, you could just shoot and shoot and shoot. I found that whole aspect of the tactile nature of the photograph is something that younger people just have no experience with. I mean, I barely do. I mean, I remember having cheap cameras and taking it to the drugstore and whatnot. But to develop things yourself, I maybe did it once or twice in a classroom just to know how it's done. But it's an interesting aspect to it. The other thing, which I'm glad you touched on, is the Shoah Foundation, which is something that I've written about a lot for Times of Israel over the years, which was and is was created in the wake of Schindler's List. It was spearheaded by Spielberg and funded, and then has grown into this great archive. We're old enough to remember when that started, and and there was some controversy at the time because they did take a throw everything against the wall approach because they just realized we're losing these people. We need to archive as much as possible right now. And there are some critical articles written about the early days of the Shoah Foundation about how it was a little haphazard and they were kind of running around like chickens without a head to get everything. But the point is, this documentary, which is now on HBO and HBO Max, is proof of how important that was, because the footage of her in 1997, 1998, or whatever it was, um, wi is evidence of how the archive will be used going forward. There's a lot of it from that era, and, her clothes look a little dated. The quality of the video stock is like, "Oh, that's late 1990s for sure." It's not HD like today, but I found that to be very touching to think of like, "Oh, we're now at a time where that Showa archive." All that controversy at the time is like, no, this is it. This is why it was done. And of course, it then bookended with even more footage of the woman today. Luckily, she's still alive, or was in 2024. She's quite old. Uh, but seeing the show archive deployed in a feature film like this is what it's all about. That was why they did it, and I found that as someone who's like read a lot about and written about that archive, seeing that it was just like really, really moving, I found.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. Let's talk about kind of the interesting angle that this documentary has because, of course, the Holocaust was perpetrated against the Jews, right? 6 million Jews, a genocidal slaughtering of 6 million Jews, and other, peoples were targeted, the gypsies, the gays, etc. But what's interesting, I think, for me, in light of the new history being written or the different perspectives of history being written out of Poland and other former Soviet Union countries, for example, or Eastern European countries, the idea that the hero of the story is, of course, a non-Jew, this firefighter, and yet at the same time, they're trying to shoehorn in the Jewish story. In this particular narrative, most of the Jews were basically victims in a way, though we are talking about the uprising as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So there's a bit of a polarity here. And I just wonder if in the United States today, focusing on a non-Jew for this, distribution on HBO Max, which is pretty big in America, I would assume, if that was their calculus, meaning make the hero a non-Jew, talk about the poor victimized Jews at the same time.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, this was a Polish production, and HBO kind of, picked it up, so to speak, and they released it on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. I have a suspicion that they put out a lot of documentaries, HBO Max, so it's quite possible they've done this before on International Holocaust Remembrance Day. So I don't know that there was a calculation of like, oh, this will be great to do one about a non-Jew. I just think that was the story that this was. But it is interesting because at first I was wondering how the two stories were going to intertwine. Because at first, the woman who's remembering who was the little girl, you're like, well, what does she have to do with this firefighter who took pictures? And then it's like, oh, okay, because her parents were deported, and she, she's kind of wandering around. Then she gets taken in by the family. It's like, oh, that's how she remembered being in that house. So that was sort of fascinating. But also, had this family not done that, and had they not, uh, you know, uh, they didn't hide a Jewish girl in their house, it would still be interesting just on the face of the photographs, and you could still perhaps make a documentary movie about it without that angle, and then there really wouldn't be any. So it was a sort of a serendipitous thing. But yeah, I mean, watching it today, I mean, listen, the history of I mean, watching it 20 years ago, it would have been whatever was going on in the news right then would have been you would have found relevance. Well, the one thing that I found interesting interesting is maybe the wrong word, depressing, was, about a half hour before I pressed play on the film, I was checking my Instagram, which I shouldn't do, and I saw,
No, Dafka, I want to say, press pause there, Jordan. Your Instagram is one of the lights of my life, and,
oh, well, my
everyone should
Instagram
follow
is
you.
well, that's very nice of you, but my Instagram is nice, but going on social media, you see things that you wish you didn't see. So I saw, Geddy Lee, who I've written about for Times of Israel before. Geddy Lee was the principal guy from the band Rush. Canadian. You don't know you edited my piece on Geddy Lee,
I
so you
know,
have
but
to
I
know
have
who this
no
guy is.
memory, you know that, okay.
Okay. Geddy Lee, the band Rush was one of the guys that since passed away. He was the great power rock, prog rock, geek rock band of the 70s and 80s and 90s and early 2000s. And Geddy Lee's real name is Gary Weinrib. He's born in Canada. His parents are Holocaust survivors from Poland. And in fact, there is one of the only rock songs about the Holocaust called Red Sector A. You might think, how could there be a rock song about the Holocaust? Well, there is. So it's about his parents' experience at Bergen-Belsen. Anyhow, um, he put something up on his Instagram that day, a picture of his grandfather, and he wrote something. I'm going to paraphrase, but he basically said, "This is a photo of one of the few existing photos of my grandfather. He was born here. Blah, blah, blah. He was killed in the concentration camp, and his crime was this, being a Jew." And it was a very moving thing for him to put on his personal Instagram page, not the band's page. And the comments were mostly respectful because anybody following Geddy Lee is a fan of the guy, and he's a great, very funny guy. He's marvelous. And it just took one scroll to get to the guard. Most people like, oh, what a man's memory be a blessing, and thank you for sharing. And then after that, it was just like a sea of just bringing in topics. Oh, how could you post a picture of this when there's a genocide in Gaza and blah blah blah. I'm like, oh my god, just you know, for one day, give it a rest for one day. International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and that's what I was looking at. And then I pressed play on this video. So the context of whatever day you're having, whatever time you're having, whatever is happening in the news, is going to come to mind. Now, the other big thing that's happening in North America right now is ICE deporting people which is something that I strongly disagree with. Maybe some of our listeners do not disagree. I know some of our listeners are more on the Trump side of things, but I certainly disagree with the methods that ICE is taking by just grabbing people without a warrant who look brown and saying, "Oh, you're pretty suspicious. Let's take you downtown," and then maybe they disappear and maybe they don't. I don't think that is the way to, keep a strong border. Nevertheless, there are also many people, including some in government, who are making uh, false equivalencies by comparing what ICE is doing in North America, which again, let me reiterate, is the methods I strongly disagree with, and also the aims. I got let the Mexican immigrants stay. They're great. They're keeping this country terrific. But I disagree. I disagree with a capital D for all those listening. However, when people in government or people in bloggers make comparisons to somebody getting picked up at the Wawa to the plight of Anne Frank, I go insane. I go freaking insane for reasons that 99.9% of our listeners understand and I don't have to get into. The aims were different, the goals were different. And when you watch this film, even though it's not the world's greatest Holocaust documentary, you and I have both seen a lot of them. This one's kind of more in the middle. There are still shocking images and very depressing stories about the goal of round them up, put them on a train with the express goal of murdering them, which is not the goal of ICE. ICE, a group I despise, and the methods of Trump I loathe. I am on the left, but when you compare it to the Gestapo, which is what a lot of people do, it makes me vomit out of my ears, which is something that is I won't do on camera. But anyway, so I had to get that off my chest. And that was something else that was on my mind during this, because, whenever you watch something, it's what's happening in the news that day.
Yeah, I
Have
hear
you
you
seen,
100%, but I just
yeah,
wanna mention, what I
yeah.
was saying earlier about the rewriting of history, and this movie, as you said, was produced by Poland, and I think it is absolutely, incredibly intentionally focused on this Polish hero,
Oh, okay.
and that too kind of he 100% deserves accolades and is, as you said, a righteous Gentile. But I think the focus of
Mm,
International Holocaust Remembrance Day should not necessarily be
right.
on the Polish non-Jew and rather on the Jews, and it shouldn't necessarily be on the woe is me kind of Jew that was, for the most part, depicted in this film, in my opinion.
I see what you're saying. Okay. Well, that's a very interesting point, and I see what you're saying now. That's a complaint to HBO. That's not a complaint to the film. Had this film just been released on a random Friday in July, you wouldn't be thinking that. So
Exactly.
that is a
Yep.
marketing issue, and you should address your letter of complaint to HBO. You can't blame the film, which again I'm sort of mixed on. You can't blame the film for that. Like, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the movie's about the movie. It's about this guy, and he's a brave guy, and he did an incredible thing for historians. I mean, you see the historians both in Poland and the US doing somersaults when they get the footage and they see it. They're going, "Wow, this is so important," and they do all the forensics on it. But I see your point. I see your point. Somebody in a boardroom said, "What are we gonna do for Holocaust Day in 2026?" I got it. It's this picture from Poland, 33 photos. And somebody could have said, because there are a lot of Holocaust documentaries out there, and maybe this one wasn't the one. Maybe just put it out on a random Friday in July. I see your point. Interesting. And again, it's we have our three grades, which is oi is negative, meh is and not bad is what we give masterpieces. So again, with respect and reverence for everybody involved and certainly the topic, I have to go with the middle grade. I have to go with the meh on this one. Do you
It
agree?
is 100% a meh for me. I think for my husband, more of an oi, because he just got up and started hanging laundry at a certain point. He was so uninterested, but
It's
okay.
not the most scintillating film, and I think the problem for me, and then I'll shut up about it, is it's not really told in an artful way. It's told in like a 60 minutes kind of way, and not even a great 60 minutes package. It's told in a slow kind of, there are documentaries that In fact, earlier, sorry, not this year, 2025, I reviewed for Times of Israel a documentary on a similar topic called Riefenstahl, and it's about the life and work and marketing of Leni Riefenstahl, who was, of course, Hitler's favorite filmmaker, and the whole and the decades she spent, decades and decades and decades. She lived till she was like maybe 100, trying to defend her career and life. The reason why these two films are similar is that they both deal with an archive, and they deal with footage, audio and video that had not been seen in decades, that were in a box. And the film, which is called Riefenstahl, by a director whose name I don't remember, who is German, um, is in itself a work of art. It is done in a very moody and stylistic and enthralling way that I found to be overall extremely enriching and enlightening, because Leni Riefenstahl herself was an artist. She was a documentary filmmaker who also made who was very innovative. Her documentary Triumph of the Will, which is Nazi, purest form of Nazi propaganda ever made, and Olympiad, which was about the Berlin Olympics, which is a soft power Nazi propaganda. Jesse Owens is in there too. We're incredibly groundbreaking, and the movie, I think, stands up to that. And the reason why I bring it up is that that filmmaker, whose name I don't recall off the top of my head, really came to the project and said, "How do I make this in an innovative way that's going to work thematically and be new?" And the people who made this film just said, "Hey, we have to report on this," and it didn't advance the narrative in any new way. But be that as it may, it's on HBO, and it is interesting. And if you were fascinated with the topic, it's a mess, not a disaster. I don't think either of us think it's a disaster. If you're interested in the topic, it's on HBO. You can press play, and there it is. So that's my cinephile opinion on the thing.
All right, thanks. Let's go to a short break.
What if prayer doesn't work? This question strikes us as a distinctly modern one, an outgrowth of the slow disenchantment of the world. But in truth, the question is an old one, and one given space to breathe here.
Welcome to Thoughts and Prayers. I'm your host, Jessica Fisher. Join me on a deep exploration of the relationship between religion and modernity through personal stories, classical texts, and conversations with leading rabbis, scholars, and educators.
You're almost not supposed to be doing this interview.
Our prayers accumulate on God's doorstep, piled outside like an unimaginably tall stack of letters. We cannot give up on the relationship because God doesn't come to the door as quickly as we may like. So let's keep knocking. Perhaps the gates of compassion will be opened.
Join us every week on Thoughts and Prayers wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our movie maven, Jordan Hoffman. Now, I think it was in our first or second, one of the very early The Reel Schmooze episodes, we almost started talking about the real pain and how much I didn't like it. I have to give a little background, and it's
Okay.
incredibly true what you said, that the day you watch something can really influence how you're thinking about it.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
that day for me was a day that, on the one hand, I was all alone in my house for one night, which is just an amazing thing for me. It never happens, and is kind of a, dance around the house naked kind of experience. Not really. But at the same time, it was also the 30th anniversary of my brother's death.
I see.
And so I was in a bit of a conflicted mood, kind of
Yeah.
like the first time I went on a reporting trip for the Times of Israel. I had 6 young children, and I was so excited to get away from them. But my first reporting trip was to Auschwitz.
Heck
So a little,
Yeah.
doing cartwheels in Krakow, and then seeing, of course, the horrors of Auschwitz. But
Yeah.
put that to
Yeah.
the side.
Yeah.
So on this particular, the 30th, the anniversary of my brother's death, I said, let's watch a comedy, me, myself, and I.
Okay. All right. It is technically a comedy, but it's a very serious comedy. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
okay. It's all coming together
Okay.
now. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I have to say that yesterday, as I was rewatching it, and parts of it also today, Knowing the characters, already having experienced them and made them a part of my psyche a little bit, made me actually enjoy their antics a lot more the second time. So Jordan, set up the film for us.
Okay, well, what you've just said about. I mean, look, a reporter needs to be objective, and you need to compartmentalize whatever is going on in your life, and that's more easily done when you're reporting news than when you're trying to review a film or a work of art. And I have gotten burned in the past when I've hated something or loved something and written a review and been, in the everybody else looks at me like I'm nuts, and then you kinda look at it again. I mean, there have been times when I feel your real pain, as it were. Well, A Real Pain is what I think to be a really great movie. It was written and directed by Jesse Eisenberg, gee. Jesse Eisenberg with the B and the G, who is a nice Jewish boy from central New Jersey who's been in, you've seen him in a million movies. His most famously was, played Mark Zuckerberg in, Social Network, and he's directed films before, and it's loosely based on his own real life experiences. It's about him and a cousin that he used to be very very close with, played by Kieran Culkin, who actually won the Oscar for this film. They have been a little bit estranged, but they get together because their grandmother has passed away, left them a little bit of money, and they decided to take the money and go on a trip to Poland, where she grew up, and also to, to see the sights, but to also go to concentration camp and take what is basically a Holocaust tour where they meet other Jews, from diverse backgrounds, some very interesting stories. One of the people on the trip is a Rwandan, convert to Judaism, and the stories with him are fascinating. And they kind of go,
Who is a true, real person,
yeah,
Jordan, that
yeah.
I've corresponded with on email. He will be a
Oh,
guest eventually on
oh,
one of
that's
my
fantastic.
podcasts.
That's
Yes,
terrific.
his name
Yeah.
is Eloge. Yes.
And they, and it's him, it's Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin kind of kibitzing, they're having breakfast and they're schmoozing, and they go to the sites and they see the site of the Warsaw, ghetto uprising, and they take pictures. And the cousin is a bit of he's got they both have mental problems, but the cousin is dealing with some real issues. And he was very close to his grandmother who passed away, and he's kind of at a breaking point. And it's a very short film. It's a quiet little movie where they just kind of walk around beautiful cities and talk and make little quips, but also there's some darkness to it. There's a lot of Chopin music, just little piano sonatas as they go around Poland, and then they do go to a concentration camp, and those scenes I think are done very eloquently. They're not kind of in your face. And then then the movie ends. It's a very small movie. It doesn't really have, they do come to a bit of a resolution and they talk things out, but it's just a slice of life film. And I found it to be very, very touching, but also at times very, very, very funny. Like there are scenes where they get on the wrong train and they make a lot of Jewish jokes, and it can be dark at times, but I just think it's a home run. And when you saw it the first time, you didn't like it. I was a bit perplexed, but what were some of your favorite scenes now that you've seen it a second time?
So definitely the antics at the memorial, that is a brilliantly done scene, and I think it was a lot of it, improvised, actually, when they got to the
You're talking about when they're at the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising
correct.
Memorial, and the cousin tries to reenact like a battle scene almost.
Yeah, and we have as well in the supporting cast, Jennifer Grey, from Dirty Dancing, and it's just lovely to see, a woman of a certain age still look so beautiful on screen
Yes.
and act
Right.
very naturally in a way. And
Yeah.
we have a couple, middle-aged couples who are traveling together in their new retirement, and, it seems very, real, this, troupe that they put together, actually. And yeah,
Yeah, it's a nice cross section of Jewish American, but not just American life. Yeah, not everybody. Yeah, most of the people think of Kieran Culkin like, oh, isn't he a crackerjack character because he's so wacky and extroverted? But like the one older guy is like, I could do without him. Frankly, he's a little much, and it's very honest.
yeah, for sure, and, of course, the guide who knows absolutely
Yeah.
everything, but is not Jewish, and so
Yeah.
is just rattling off facts as, as they occur.
Yes.
It seemed very real to me because, again, I was in Poland, actually just the one time, and it was the guide that was with our group. It was a group of Holocaust survivors from Israel and reporters marking the liberation of Auschwitz. And our guide was this Polish, very good English, but non-Jew, just
Mm.
rattling off the facts to the people who had lived this history. It was just a surreal moment as well. But I would have to say that in terms of the film, I would still not give it a not bad. I don't
Oh.
like the film, okay? But I would say it was much more in the meh category than the oi category the
Okay.
first time I saw it,
Yeah.
because they're just so annoying. These 2 guys are so annoying, and so the second time, I can watch it with a half smile, like, kinda like seeing my kids when they're being annoying with each other, like, "Oh,
Yeah.
they'll get over it." But they are so annoying. And it's these, characters, the super uptight Jew, and they're almost, caricatures in a way, and then you have the hippie-ish, out of the box, creative spirit person,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and they just grate on me, but that just means they did it perfectly, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I when like the character that Jesse Eisenberg plays, that's him. I mean, I've actually, and not to drop too many names on the Real Schmooze, but of the I have met him a few times, and I've spent some time with him. I mean, we're not buds, we don't hang out, but he is that guy. That the clothes he wears in the movie are his clothes. That hat he wears in the movie, he wears that hat all day long, and he is that kind of nervous. He is a little bit, and you probably admit it, he is a little bit of a cliche of a neurotic New York Jew. I mean, that's just who he is. But he is meant to be sort of the anchor character, the character you identify with, and he himself is difficult to identify with. Like in a normal movie, he would be the outsider character, and there would be a different anchor character to look at him like, "Oh, you look at my crazy cousin." But in this movie, he's the base, and Kieran Culkin is the maniac. So it's amped up.
But he's not, like, this is where I would disagree with you. I think the whole movie is pointing out, Jesse's neuroses more than Kieran's, out of the box behavior. Kieran is the most human element of it. Of course, we find out at a certain point, spoiler, 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 X, 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 moving on. But Jesse, the whole movie, you just wanna be like, dude, deep breaths, deep
Yeah.
breaths, come on."
Well, there definitely is a give and take that they both need to change if they want their lives to move forward. I think I'm more identified with the Jesse character. Um, but yeah, yeah, I mean, yes, there is a synthesis at the end that is meant, they both have to reach across the aisle a little bit. And it is funny, but yeah, they are annoying. I mean, the movie is it's meant to be a little bit of a, makes your stomach hurt a little bit, like all great screwball comedies. The great Preston Sturges, kind of the inventor of the screwball comedy, or the main architect. The whole point of his film is that you have a nervous knot in your stomach the whole time because you're waiting for all the refuse to hit the fan, and that's what drives the engine. So,
Yeah,
but
and I
I'm
just don't
glad you took
like
a
that
second look. Yeah.
feeling to begin with. I don't enjoy that,
Some movies are
and
not fun. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
No,
and I'd
it's
have
like
to say as well, like, New York Jews, like, I didn't of course, many of my relatives are these New York Jews, but I only saw
yeah,
them, a couple days every couple of years,
yeah.
and so it's this, caricature of a person that I just can't fully grasp, and that's why I would have to say as well, like, I've never really sought out Woody Allen films because the few that I've seen are kinda like, "Whoa, come on, person, get it together."
Yes, I mean, there is that persona. I think if you really look under the hood of the Woody Allen persona, though, there is more of a bite to it. Um, because you loved Marty Supreme because that's not the Woody Allen character. You know, it's the chutzpah character, and I think that
Exactly, the
that yeah.
Israeli Jew
Yeah.
versus the diaspora Jew. I'm
Because
not
yeah,
even
exactly.
kidding. I'm not even
No, you're
kidding.
right.
It's so
You're
true. Yeah.
you're not wrong. And I think, you know, eventually we're gonna start watching more Woody Allen movies with the Woody Allen persona. And some of it are, you know, uh, some of it is exactly what you're saying, but there's more to it than that. There is more nuance there. But you're right. I mean, it's a different thing. And it is a cliche and he's leaning into it. But I think in this particular case, that is just who he is. He's a very nervous guy. He's very open about his OCD. I've witnessed him kind of, I mean, you know, that's he's talked a lot about his mental health issues, and I've been witness to it personally. And you know, he's got some mishigas, which is why it's fascinating that he by choice is a film actor and filmmaker, which could not be. It's a very stressful job because there's so much of other people's money at stake. He is an actor in major Hollywood productions. You know, that's sort of what he does to keep the lights on in his house so he can make small movies like A Real Pain, which I think is his real joy. And, you know, when you are starring in a Batman film, as he's done, you know, he plays Lex Luthor, or played, past tense, in some pretty lousy Batman movies, but he's fine in them. You know, if you sneeze the wrong way, that's $1 million out the window. That's so much pressure. I couldn't do that. No way I could do that. And I don't have a 100th of the phobias this guy's got. And somehow that doesn't bother him. I've asked him about this, and that does not. That's like, oh no, that's fine. He's like, because in his head, it's like when it's out in the open like that, he can face it. You know, he can't watch himself on screen. He's never watched his own movies, but when he's directing, he has to watch himself and he has to edit it. And it's like, well, because I'm in control now, so I can do it, you know, is the thinking. So he's a very interesting guy. And yeah, the movie came out 2024. I wanted, where was it? Because it was around this time last year was the Oscars. Yes. So the movie came out in 2024, and Kieran Culkin did win the Oscar in 2025, around this time last year. And the film itself had been nominated for other things. I believe Best Original Screenplay, which it should have won, in my opinion. Whatever did win was probably fine, but not as good. Um, and anyhow, so but it's been a while, so probably a lot of our listeners have seen it already. But if you haven't, now is the time, because if Amanda could take a look at it, so should you.
Take a second look at it,
Second,
right? Okay,
exactly,
come on, that
exactly.
took a lot of
It
Okay,
takes a lot of time.
Jordan,
Yeah.
so we've come to the point in our conversation where we need to figure out what we're watching
Yeah.
next week.
Okay. Well, you know, it's true. We didn't, and I did send an email which you didn't respond to, so I'm going to say that you're fine with
Nice.
it.
Yeah, classic.
I think what
Classic
we're going to
Amanda.
do. Yeah, no. You're very good on emails. But I think what we're going to do next week is we will watch a Woody Allen movie, because you love documentaries and you love short films.
Yes.
So we're going to watch the movie Zelig. And
Okay.
Zelig is a very resonant uh Jewish film, for reasons you will understand very quickly when you watch Zelig. Zelig came out in like 83, I think, 83, 84. Zelig is 79 minutes. And I, for decades now, have been using the term a Zelig as a unit of time. Like if you're looking at something and how you look on the map, how long is it going to take to get there? Oh, it's 83 minutes away. I'm like, oh, that's, you know, that's basically a Zelig, you know? Or you look at something and it's only going to take you, 40 minutes. It's like, oh, I'll be there in half a Zelig, no problem. So anyway, we're going to watch Zelig, which I love. So I think you'll like it too. And then there is, to keep it in Poland and to keep it in documentaries, there is a Polish documentary that I don't know if all of our listeners will be able to watch themselves, because these things are floating around. But I think there's some news elements to it, so we should probably watch it. We've been talking about it for a while. The film is called Among Neighbors,
Right.
and it made some news in Poland for reasons that we'll discuss next week. So I think that's a nice pairing. Zelig, we'll probably spend more time
Yeah. And I also think, Jordan, this is a good antithesis to the documentary that we saw this week in terms of its
Yeah,
historical perspective. So,
precisely,
way to go,
precisely.
Jordan. Good
Oh,
job.
thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah,
So,
you're
Among
welcome.
Neighbors will be something that maybe our listeners will have to, they could try to track it down, but it may be something that we'll just be kind of reporting to them. But I think we'll spend more time talking about Zelig, which I bet a lot of our listeners saw at some point, or maybe heard of at least. It's a pretty famous movie, and it came out in the early 80s, and is, I'm sure people can find it, rent it for $4 on Amazon or something like that.
Okay, this episode is approaching the full Zelig, so we should probably wrap it up now.
Sorry.
Maybe we're at like 6/8 of a Zelig now.
Yeah,
I
we're
don't know.
6, 8, 7, 3/4 of a
Yeah.
Zelig. Yeah, no trouble.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, Jordan, thank you as always. Always a pleasure, even when
Thank
we're
you.
discussing weighty topics. And I just always appreciate it.
Yeah, weighty topics on International Holocaust Memorial Day. And it's something we were talking before we started recording, and I was going to bring it up, but I get confused. I showed my American ignorance, but this is good. Yesterday was International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And I said to you, is that the day when a siren goes off in Israel and everybody stops? If they're in the car, they get out of the car. And you further educated me. There's actually 2 days, right?
Right. There's Yom HaShoah, which is the Israeli Holocaust Memorial Day. And that's the day that we here in Israel celebrate. We don't actually celebrate or mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day here basically at all.
I see.
So, yeah, so stay tuned. We can have a whole nother full episode on the Holocaust, not just a half one like next week. We can do it.
Okay. So Yom HaShoah is the day when, and have you ever been in a car when the siren goes off? Because I've seen video of like everybody just pulls over, and no matter what you're doing or who you are, the whole country stops for 60 seconds, basically.
Yeah, this is terrible to admit, but there are 2 days in which the country stops. One is Yom HaZikaron, the Remembrance Day for the fallen soldiers and victims of terror, and also Yom HaShoah. And on one of the days, there are 2 sirens, one at night and one in the morning, and
Oh, I see.
on the other day, it's just in the morning. And last year, I was inside a hospital on Yom HaShoah, and for some reason, the actual unit where we were in did not have speakers set up to play the siren, and everyone was up at arms and just started playing it through their phone, and it was
Sure.
this whole scene. But no, I've never been in a car. I do have a funny story. I mean, it's terrible to say, but
Mm.
one of my friends was taking a pregnancy test once, and all of a sudden the siren went off, and so she told us quite cleverly, she stood up immediately and just is holding this dripping stick. So that's quite an image that I keep in mind always when I hear the
Wow.
siren. Yeah.
That
All right,
the
Jordan,
symbolism on
we're
that is perfect. So that's like an
100%.
Isaac Bashevis Singer story, just at the end of the Real Schmooze. That was wonderful. So there you go.
For sure. All right, my friend, we will meet up next week, and I look forward to it.
Okay. See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's The Reel Schmooze. Please check out another installment next week. This episode was produced by Ari Schlacht. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, or even movie suggestions, please send us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until next week, shalom.